Clarissa West had never imagined that her love story would become a tangled web of heartbreak and betrayal. Once cherished by her billionaire husband Robert West, she now found herself lonely in a mansion filled with shadows of what could have been. The tension between them grew like dark storm clouds when Robert began devoting more time and affection to the mysterious, alluring Juliet Summers. Meanwhile, Clarissa discovered she was pregnant, a secret she desperately hoped would bring them closer. Instead, it drove them further apart, culminating in a shattering decision that left Robert begging her not to walk away. This is their story. Clarissa West was 19 when she first met Robert at a Manhattan charity gala. He was a rising force in the tech industry, known for innovative software solutions that had investors lining up at his door. With an athletic build and sharp, dark suits that emphasized his broad shoulders, he exuded confidence from every pore. Yet behind the charm, Clarissa sensed a vulnerability that instantly made her feel protective of him. Robert, the son of a British banker and an American entrepreneur, was raised amid the luxury of private jets, exclusive clubs, and the world's most exquisite hotels. He seemed to glide through life unruffled, unbothered, forever accompanied by a swirl of admirers, sycophants, and paparazzi. Clarissa grew up in a more modest environment in upstate New York, with both parents working tirelessly, her mother as a nurse and her father as a mechanic. Though their household had been filled with love, money was often short. She arrived at the charity event wearing her cousin's borrowed gown, anxious about fitting into a world far above her station. That anxiety vanished the moment Robert approached her. Sensing her discomfort, he made small talk about her dress and the fresh rose pinned to her hair. Clarissa's shy smile, radiant despite the intimidation she felt, caught his attention in a sea of glittering socialites. He asked her name, she blushed, and answered. 2 days later, he tracked down her phone number through a mutual friend, Christopher Allen, insisting he needed to see her again. Their romance unfolded at lightning speed. Their first date was a horse-drawn carriage ride through Central Park. The second date included front-row seats to a Broadway show. In a whirlwind, Clarissa found herself introduced to Robert's parents, who immediately fell in love with her warmth and humility. It wasn't long before Robert proposed on a weekend getaway to Lake Como in Italy. They married shortly thereafter, with the tabloids dubbing Clarissa the luckiest woman in New York. But neither love nor luck could shield her from the demanding lifestyle that Robert's business empire soon required. Over time, the once effortless closeness between them began to erode under the weight of business acquisitions, corporate responsibilities, and constant travel. Robert's new project, a tech startup named West Innovations, was pulling him away day and night. Clarissa, lonely in their lavish penthouse on Fifth Avenue, would go weeks without sharing a meaningful conversation with her husband. She tried to stay patient. She joined him at industry events, wearing a dazzling array of couture gowns. She learned to navigate polite small talk with shareholders and potential investors, even though every fiber in her body yearned for simpler times, for heart-to-heart conversations over cheap coffee and bagels. Robert was usually so busy greeting others, discussing new deals, and ensuring his corporate image remained impeccable, that he barely noticed her yearning glances. As the months turned into years, the cracks in their relationship broadened. Clarissa reminded herself that her husband loved her, even if he had no time to show it in ways that mattered. And then Juliet Summers appeared like a rogue meteor, crashing into their universe. Juliet was a former model with cascading auburn hair, a figure that turned heads wherever she went, and a fierce intellect to match her looks. She was introduced to Robert at an exclusive tech conference in London, where she expressed an interest in investing in West innovations. Their initial conversations were strictly business, so Robert claimed. But Clarissa couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling in her gut each time she saw photographs of them together at corporate functions. Their chemistry practically crackled off the pages of glossy magazines. For the first time, Clarissa felt fear gripping her heart. She feared the potential betrayal, feared that the life she had built was a fragile house of cards, teetering under the gust of her husband's growing attraction to someone else. And then came the day her doctor told her she was expecting. Clarissa's first thought was pure, radiant joy. She imagined a child bridging the gap between her and Robert, healing their relationship. Yet, as the future would reveal, the reality wasn't so simple. Clarissa found out about her pregnancy during a routine checkup at Mount Sinai Hospital, where she had gone for fatigue and persistent nausea. The doctor, Dr. Naomi Benson, a gentle soul with kind eyes, delivered the news with a cautious smile. "A pregnancy test came back positive, Mrs. West," she said, scanning Clarissa's anxious face. "I can see you're overwhelmed, but congratulations, you're going to be a mother." Her heart pounded wildly, a mixture of joy and terror swirling within her. Joy because she had always wanted to be a mother. Terror because she wasn't certain how Robert would react. She longed for his reassurance, his gentle hug, his exuberance at the idea of fatherhood. But they had grown so distant lately that she couldn't even predict whether he'd be excited or inconvenienced. When Clarissa arrived back at the penthouse, Robert was busy on a conference call in his study, discussing a new IPO for West Innovations. Her footsteps echoed on the Italian marble floor as she waited outside the door. She had imagined a grand reveal, maybe cooking a special dinner, slipping the sonogram photo onto his dinner plate. She wanted something memorable, like the old Robert who once left 20 roses on her doorstep for their 20th date. But she had no idea if that Robert still existed. She decided to wait until after his call. 2 hours later, he still hadn't emerged. Worried her courage might fade, she quietly knocked and entered. Robert glanced up from his desk, his handsome features marred by fatigue. His eyes were distant, as though a million calculations and negotiations stood between them. "What is it, Clarissa?" he asked, more out of routine courtesy than genuine curiosity. Her palms sweated. She almost backed out, thinking maybe she should plan something more romantic. But the words tumbled out anyway. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, she saw a flicker, an unguarded glint in his eyes that might have been joy. Then, just as quickly, he masked it with a polite smile. Wow, that's big news." "Big news," she repeated softly, hoping he would stand, come around the desk, and embrace her. But he didn't. "It is. I just need time to process this," he said, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive charcoal suit. "You know how big this quarter is for the company. We have the new facility opening in Singapore, the pending deals with the EU, plus this new investor, Juliet Summers, who's ready to pour millions into our next project." Clarissa nodded, feeling her heart constrict. He hadn't even asked how far along she was. He was speaking about the pregnancy as if it were a line item on a business ledger. Nevertheless, she tried to remain positive. "I understand you're busy, Robert, but I really want us to share this moment. Our child. This is a miracle for us." She placed a hand on her belly, tears threatening to surface. Robert sighed and finally approached her, pressing a brief kiss to her forehead. "We'll talk more about it tonight, I promise. Just let me finish a few things." The moment felt hollow, forced, and his phone buzzed with notifications again. He returned to his desk almost instantly. By the time dinner rolled around, Robert was preoccupied with business calls. Clarissa dined alone in the candlelit dining room, picking at her meal. In the background, the quiet hum of classical music did little to soothe her. Robert had broken his promise to speak with her about the baby. Another day passed, and then another, with no real conversation about their future as parents. Robert was physically present, but emotionally absent. In desperation, Clarissa confided in her closest friend, Samantha Robertson, who worked as a journalist for a major newspaper. Samantha had introduced Clarissa to Robert years ago, and she'd always been someone Clarissa trusted with her secrets. "He's drifting away," Clarissa admitted as they sipped tea at a small cafe near Rockefeller Center. Her eyes were rimmed with tears. "It's like he's more excited about expansions and conferences than the baby." Samantha reached across the table and squeezed Clarissa's hand. "Talk to him openly. Don't let him hide behind work as an excuse. If you don't make him see the importance of this child, he'll just keep ignoring it." Clarissa nodded, but her friend's advice rang hollow. She'd tried time and again to talk to Robert, only to be brushed aside by his relentless schedule. And behind her mounting concern, a more insidious suspicion lingered. Could it be that Juliet Summers had already wrapped him around her little finger? Rumors were swirling that Robert was often seen dining with Juliet under the guise of business. By the end of that week, Clarissa was convinced her marriage was spiraling out of control at the very moment she needed Robert the most. The further Clarissa traveled on her pregnancy journey, the more apparent Robert's absence became. She attended prenatal checkups alone. She researched parenting techniques by herself, flipping through baby name books in the library, trying to find the perfect name that would inspire Robert to care. She even started a journal, scribbling down her hopes, fears, and a record of the baby's progress. One night, after Robert missed yet another scheduled ultrasound appointment, Clarissa confronted him in their marble-floored living room. She wore a comfortable sweater that revealed a slight baby bump, standing before him with tear-filled eyes. "How long can this go on, Robert?" she demanded, voice trembling. "I'm carrying our child, but it's like you don't even care. You're never here when I need you." His phone buzzed again, and Clarissa snatched it from the coffee table, pressing it to her chest. "We're talking," she said firmly. "No phone calls, no texts, until we're done." He exhaled slowly, frustration evident. "All right, I'm listening." "I feel like you're slipping away from me," she murmured, tears threatening to spill. "I see pictures of you and Juliet at black tie galas. Everyone's talking about how close you two look. I ask you to come to doctor's visits, and you find excuses. Do you even care about me anymore?" Robert's jaw clenched. "Of course I care about you, about us. But West Innovations is expanding faster than I anticipated. Juliet's an invaluable investor and partner, so I have to keep her happy. Without her, we might lose crucial funding. This is about our future, Clarissa. The future of our child." He sounded exasperated, as though Clarissa's concerns were childish. "I'm doing this for both of you," he added, stepping forward. "I want our child to have everything. Top schools, the best doctors, a secure inheritance. That requires capital and growth. Juliet's involvement is purely professional." Clarissa wanted to believe him. She studied his face, searching for sincerity. In the depths of his grey eyes, she caught a glimpse of guilt. Was it guilt for ignoring her, or guilt for something worse? Before Clarissa could probe further, Robert's phone buzzed insistently in her grasp. The name Juliet Summers flashed on the screen. Clarissa's face paled. He took the phone from her, sighing. I need to take this. It's important." Clarissa turned away, feeling her heart sink. She left him alone in the living room, the echo of his voice murmuring into the phone, chasing her up the grand staircase. That night, she barely slept, imagining Robert in Juliet's arms, whispering sweet words he no longer spoke to Clarissa. The baby kicked within her, and tears slipped down her cheeks. Over the next month, Clarissa's suspicions deepened as Robert spent more and more time traveling. He'd jet off to London or Dubai at a moment's notice. Clarissa would call, and each time, her calls went to voicemail, or he'd text a rushed apology about being in a meeting. Juliet's name popped up regularly in gossip columns describing sightings of her and Robert at fancy restaurants and posh resorts. Photographs showed them side by side, smiling at each other in a way that burned Clarissa's soul. One day, Clarissa decided to confront Juliet directly. She had no plan, no script, just raw desperation. She found out that Juliet was staying at the Ritz-Carlton in Manhattan for a high-profile fundraiser. Summoning her courage, Clarissa made her way to the lobby. She wore a simple maternity dress and a coat that stretched uncomfortably around her growing belly. Surrounded by designer-labeled women, her self-consciousness grew. At the concierge desk, she inquired, "Is Miss Juliet Summers available? I'd like to speak to her if possible." The receptionist gave her a polite, almost pitying look. Clarissa realized how she must appear. An anxious, pregnant woman, clearly out of place. Still, she refused to be deterred. "Miss Summers is attending a private function upstairs," the receptionist replied calmly. Clarissa's determination faltered. She turned and scanned the lobby, eventually spotting a tall, elegant figure with auburn hair stepping out of an elevator. Even from a distance, Juliet glowed with confidence. She wore a sleek, black designer gown, her slender arms adorned by glittering bracelets. Clarissa's breath caught in her throat. This was the woman who might be stealing her husband. She forced one foot in front of the other until she stood a few paces away. "Juliet," she managed to say. Her voice wavered. Juliet's smile was as bright as it was calculating. "Yes. Have we met?" She studied Clarissa with mild interest, taking in her obvious pregnancy. "I'm Clarissa West," she stammered, "Robert West's wife." Juliet's smile softened into something akin to sympathy. "Oh, Clarissa, yes. Robert speaks of you often." Her voice was refined, practiced. "I've been meaning to get in touch with you, but we've both been very busy." Clarissa's heart hammered in her chest. "Are you and Robert—" Juliet placed a manicured hand on Clarissa's arm. "You mustn't worry about rumors. Robert and I are business associates. I'm sorry if our public appearances have caused you any distress." She let out a flawless little laugh that made Clarissa's skin prickle with unease. "You know how the paparazzi twist every story." Despite the reassuring words, Clarissa couldn't ignore the steely confidence in Juliet's gaze. It felt like a subtle challenge, as though Juliet was saying, "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Clarissa felt small, overshadowed by Juliet's poise and the luxurious world she inhabited. With no real resolution, she fled the hotel, tears streaming down her cheeks, convinced more than ever that Juliet was no mere business associate. The sense of impending doom was real, and she feared it might be too late to salvage her marriage. Robert's affair was confirmed in the cruelest way possible. One late afternoon, Clarissa received a package at the penthouse. Inside was a USB drive with no return address, along with a brief note, "You deserve to know the truth." She hesitated for a moment before slipping the USB into her laptop. Her hands shook as she clicked on the single video file. What she saw froze her blood. Grainy footage, obviously from a paparazzi's long lens, showed Robert and Juliet checking into a luxury suite at a Parisian hotel, the iconic Eiffel Tower looming in the background. The timestamp was from 3 weeks prior, supposedly a business trip. The video, though distant and grainy, left no doubt. The pair kissed before entering the suite. The footage cut off as the door closed. Tears streamed down Clarissa's face. She realized she was panting, her chest tight. She couldn't process the betrayal. Yes, she had suspected, but seeing it confirmed shattered any illusions she still clung to. Her hands clenched into fists. Anger flared, swiftly followed by despair. She was pregnant and alone. Her husband was in another country, indulging in the arms of another woman. Hot tears spilled over her cheeks as the baby fluttered in her belly. She replayed the video, half hoping she had misread the situation. But the evidence was undeniable. A sob tore from her throat. She slammed the laptop shut, wishing she could erase what she had just witnessed from her mind. She texted Robert in a rage. "I know everything." He called her within minutes. "Clarissa," he began, sounding alarmed. "Where did you get that?" "It's not what it looks like." She cut him off. "Don't lie. I have video proof. You checked into a hotel with her. You kissed her." Her voice quavered with fury and heartbreak. "How could you do this to me, to our child?" A heavy silence filled the line. Then Robert sighed. "I'm sorry. I never intended for it to go this far. Juliet and I—" He paused, as though searching for the right words. "It started with business, but I got swept up." Clarissa's world spun. She wanted to scream, but her tears choked the words. "Robert, I'm pregnant with your child. Did you even think about that?" A pained silence came from his end. Finally, he said, "I don't know what to say." "That's because there's nothing left to say," she replied through clenched teeth before ending the call. She threw the phone onto the sofa as if it were contaminated. The following days were a tempest of heartbreak and confusion. Clarissa found herself oscillating between despair and rage. In a conversation with her friend Samantha, she weighed her options, staying in this marriage for the baby's sake or leaving to protect her own sanity. Samantha's advice was gentle, yet firm. "I can't tell you what to do, but if he's cheated once, you need to think carefully about how he'll be as a father and husband in the future." Clarissa decided to confront Robert one last time, face to face. She needed answers, some semblance of closure or honesty. She asked him to meet her at their penthouse, and this time he obliged. He arrived looking haggard, dark circles under his eyes. The guilt was etched into his face. "Why?" she managed to whisper after letting him in. "Was I not enough? Was our marriage too plain for you?" Robert ran a hand over his face. "Clarissa, you were always enough. More than enough. I don't have a good excuse. I can't blame work pressure or some midlife crisis. I made a terrible mistake, and I regret it." Her tears blurred her vision. "I trusted you." He bowed his head. "I know. I betrayed that trust." They stood in silence, the grandeur of the penthouse around them, feeling mocking and hollow. Clarissa wrapped her arms around her baby bump. "I'm leaving," she said, voice trembling. "I can't stay here and watch you. This life, Juliet can have it for all I care, but our child won't be raised in a household of lies." Robert's eyes flashed with panic. "Clarissa, please, give me a chance to make this right." "How?" she asked quietly, searching his eyes. "Can you give up Juliet?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. The bitter realization sank into Clarissa's heart. He wanted both the mistress and the wife. Perhaps he was too used to getting everything he desired, from multi-billion-dollar deals to exclusive properties. Why not the luxury of two women? That's what I thought, Clarissa whispered. She turned to leave, but he caught her arm gently. Where will you go? His voice trembled with genuine concern. Somewhere safe, away from you, she said softly, tugging her arm free. He watched her climb the staircase to pack her bags, a defeated expression on his face. Despite the heartbreak, Clarissa felt a surge of resolve. She couldn't subject herself or her unborn child to a life overshadowed by deceit. She would leave, not knowing what the future held, but certain she had to protect her heart and her child. Clarissa found temporary refuge with her parents in upstate New York. Their modest home felt like a sanctuary compared to the cold opulence of the penthouse she had shared with Robert. Her mother, Harriet James, fussed over her constantly, preparing healthy meals to nourish both Clarissa and the baby. Her father, Michael James, quietly fixed up the spare bedroom, adding extra pillows and painting the walls a soothing pastel color. The physical distance from Robert brought a measure of peace, yet the emotional wound throbbed relentlessly. Days turned into weeks. Robert tried to contact Clarissa numerous times, leaving voicemails, sending apologetic texts, even emailing long letters expressing remorse and love. But Clarissa couldn't bear to read them. She wasn't ready to forgive or forget. Each time the phone buzzed with his name, her heart lurched with a combination of longing and fury, so she let it go unanswered. During her second trimester, she decided to look for a more permanent living arrangement. She didn't want to burden her aging parents with her indefinite stay. Searching through apartment listings, she found a cozy one-bedroom rental in a small town named Kingston, only a short drive from her parents, but far enough to start anew. The apartment was humble: a small living room, a kitchenette, and a bedroom just large enough for a crib. But it was hers, and that autonomy felt like freedom. Clarissa's friend, Samantha, visited her often, bringing baby clothes, books, and moral support. One afternoon, they were sorting through a pile of donated items from a local charity when Samantha paused, looking thoughtful. "Have you spoken with a lawyer?" she asked gently. Clarissa shook her head. "Not yet. I'm still trying to figure out what to do about the marriage, about everything." Samantha placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I understand. Just remember that your baby has rights, and so do you." As the weeks passed, Clarissa focused on self-care. She took prenatal yoga classes at a local community center, made new acquaintances, and threw herself into preparing for motherhood. She joined a local mothers group where women shared stories of their journeys. Some were single moms, others remarried, but all faced the common challenges of pregnancy and child rearing. Surrounded by these supportive women, Clarissa felt less alone, like she was forging a new path for herself. Still, at night, she sometimes woke up from dreams of Robert. In these dreams, he was the old Robert, the one who used to hold her hand and make silly jokes. The dreams left her with a hollow ache when she awoke, the reality of his betrayal flooding her mind. One evening, as she was folding laundry, her phone buzzed again. This time, the caller was not Robert, but Christopher Allen, their mutual friend who had initially introduced them at the Manhattan Gala. She picked up, hesitantly. "Clarissa, I'm so sorry about everything," Christopher said, sincerity brimming in his voice. "I heard what happened. Robert told me you left." She exhaled. "Yes, Christopher, I did." "He's a wreck," Christopher said quietly. "He's hardly eating. He's missing important meetings, ignoring clients. He looks terrible." Clarissa felt her heart twist. Despite everything, She still cared about Robert's well-being. "He made his choices," she said, her tone gentle, yet firm. "I know," Christopher replied. "I'm not excusing him. But I also know he regrets it profoundly. I just want you to know that if you need anything, financial support, emotional support, I'm here. I don't want you to feel alone." Tears welled in her eyes. She appreciated his kindness, but also felt a pang of sadness, remembering the life she had left. "Thank you," she whispered, ending the call shortly after. The conversation left her mind swirling. Was Robert truly remorseful? Or was it just guilt over losing his picture-perfect marriage? At her next doctor's appointment, she was told the baby was healthy and growing well. Relief washed over Clarissa, mixed with a bittersweet longing to share this joy with Robert. She remembered the once excited dream they both shared of a big family, a house filled with laughter. Now, it seemed impossible. A few days later, Clarissa was shopping for baby essentials at a local store when she ran into an old high school acquaintance, Jacob Harrington. They'd known each other in passing. Jacob was a year ahead of her, a sports enthusiast who'd gone on to become a high school coach. He recognized Clarissa by her bright hazel eyes and greeted her warmly. "Clarissa James, it's been ages." He glanced at her pregnant belly. "Congratulations." They chatted briefly, and Clarissa felt a spark of normalcy for the first time in months. Jacob told her he'd recently moved back to Kingston to care for his ailing mother. He joked about how life had come full circle. They exchanged numbers, promising to catch up over coffee sometime. Though Clarissa's heart was still too bruised to consider any new relationship, the interaction felt like a breath of fresh air, a reminder that the world kept turning and that she too could move on, step by step. Little did she know, her tentative steps toward a new life would soon be overshadowed by Robert's sudden reappearance, desperate to reclaim what he had lost. Clarissa was 6 months pregnant when Robert showed up on her doorstep in Kingston, unannounced. She answered the door one evening, to find him standing there, disheveled, and carrying a bouquet of wilted roses, as though he'd driven for hours without caring for them properly. The crisp autumn air whipped around them. "Clarissa," he began, voice trembling, "I needed to see you." She stared at him in disbelief. It had been weeks since their last phone call, and now here he was, uninvited, looking nothing like the polished billionaire she'd known. His hair was unkempt, his eyes rimmed red, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Robert," she managed to say, "what are you doing here?" He thrust the roses toward her awkwardly. I'm sorry about everything. I was stupid, reckless. Please, can I come in?" Clarissa hesitated, then stepped aside. She guided him into her humble living room, where second-hand furniture and pastel walls offered a stark contrast to the penthouse life. He glanced around, looking both out of place and deeply humbled. She gestured for him to sit on the worn-out couch. "How did you find me?" she asked, arms crossed protectively over her belly. "I called your mother," he said, eyes cast down. "She refused to let me come until I convinced her I wasn't leaving without seeing you. I had to do a lot of begging." For a moment, resentment flared. He wouldn't beg for me before, but she forced herself to remain calm. "What do you want, Robert?" He took a shaky breath. "You and our baby are all I want. I ended things with Juliet, ended the partnership. It's over." Clarissa's eyes flickered. "So now that you've ended it, you think you can just walk back into my life?" He swallowed hard. "I'm not trying to trivialize the pain I caused you. I know I messed up horribly. Every day since you left, I've been haunted by my mistake. Juliet was never worth losing you, losing our baby. Tears pricked Clarissa's eyes, but she blinked them away. Robert, I'm not the same woman who left that penthouse. I'm stronger now, and I have no guarantee you won't hurt me again. He shifted closer, hands trembling. I know. I can't erase what I did, but I'm begging you for a second chance. Let me prove I can be a better husband and father. She studied him, his slumped shoulders, his raw desperation, the tear that escaped the corner of his eye. He looked genuine, a far cry from the confident, untouchable billionaire. Yet the memory of his betrayal seared fresh in her mind. Trust doesn't come back that easily, she said softly. I can't just forget everything because you showed up with flowers. I understand, he whispered. Let me stay in town for a while. Let me help with the pregnancy, attend doctor's appointments, whatever you need. Clarissa didn't respond immediately. She felt the baby kick, and instinctively, her hands cradled her belly. In that moment, she realized how much she wished the baby could have its father involved, if only he was genuinely repentant. She also recognized the risk of letting him back into her heart. Stay if you want, she said at last, her voice steady. I won't turn you away from your child, but don't expect me to open my arms and pretend none of this happened. Robert nodded, tears in his eyes. Thank you, he murmured, voice trembling with relief. I'll do whatever it takes. That night, Clarissa allowed him to sleep on the couch, a symbolic distance to remind both of them that trust was far from rebuilt. She lay awake in her bedroom, wrestling with conflicting emotions. Part of her longed to be held by him, to believe that his remorse was genuine, that they could still have the family she once dreamed of. Another part of her screamed that letting him in would only invite more heartache. She listened to the muffled sounds of him shifting on the couch and wondered if redemption was truly possible, or if this was merely the calm before another storm. Over the following days, Robert stayed in a small motel on the outskirts of Kingston, determined to prove to Clarissa that he was there for more than a fleeting apology. He texted her daily, asking how she was feeling, if she needed help buying groceries or driving to doctor's appointments. He seemed genuinely concerned, more present and attentive than he had been throughout her pregnancy. Samantha, ever protective, remained skeptical. People can change, sure, but do you really believe Robert's done with Juliet? She asked over the phone one morning. She's the kind of person who doesn't go down without a fight. Clarissa's stomach twisted at the thought. He told me it's over. The question is whether I can believe him. Her friend hesitated. Just promise me you'll be careful. The next day, Robert accompanied Clarissa to her prenatal checkup. Sitting in the waiting room, Robert looked apprehensive, fidgeting with his hands. Clarissa, still guarded, kept some distance. Yet she couldn't deny feeling a flicker of hope. He seemed genuinely invested this time, asking Dr. Naomi Benson questions about the baby's due date, recommended supplements, and whether Clarissa needed more rest. When the ultrasound began, Robert's face transformed. The black and white screen showed the outline of a tiny, wriggling figure. Tears shimmered in his eyes. Clarissa watched him, her own heart clenching with emotion. For a fleeting moment, it felt like they were on the same page again, united in awe of their growing child. After the appointment, Robert insisted on treating Clarissa to lunch. They found a quaint little cafe in town, a place she had frequented with her mother's group. The contrast between Robert's designer loafers and the cafe's rustic wooden floors was striking, but he seemed unbothered by the modest setting. Over sandwiches and lemonade, Robert cleared his throat. I spoke to the board at West Innovations, he said, voice tinged with anxiety. I'm taking a step back for the next few months. Christopher Allen will handle day-to-day operations. I want to be here." Clarissa put her sandwich down, surprise evident on her face. "Are you sure that's a good idea? Your company is not more important than you or our baby," he interjected, a hint of regret in his tone. "I've spent years putting business first, and look where it got me. Losing you was the wake-up call I needed." She studied him, uncertain whether to feel relief or suspicion. "And Juliet?" she finally asked. His gaze fell to the table. "She's angry with me, of course. I ended the partnership and made it clear we can't see each other in any capacity, personal or professional. She's threatened lawsuits, sabotage. Who knows? But I'll face it. It's my penance for betraying you." Clarissa's heartbeat raced. She'd never known Robert to back away from a lucrative deal, let alone sabotage a professional relationship, purely for moral reasons. Part of her wanted to believe this was a sign of true remorse. "Thank you," she said quietly, sipping her lemonade to hide the quake in her voice. Robert reached across the table, gently placing his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. Warmth spread through her chest, mingled with the weight of their complicated past. That afternoon, Robert dropped Clarissa off at her apartment. Before leaving, he hesitated at the door. "Can we talk some more tonight? Maybe go for a walk? I'd like to hear how you've been, beyond the baby stuff." Clarissa nodded slowly, feeling a cautious optimism. "All right," she agreed, aware she was treading on dangerous ground. She still had deep wounds that couldn't be bandaged overnight. Later that evening, Robert picked her up, and they strolled through a nearby park, the crisp autumn leaves crunching underfoot. Clarissa wore a warm coat around her belly, and Robert instinctively offered her an arm for support. They spoke about mundane things at first, local restaurants, small-town gossip. Then the conversation shifted to the painful subject of Juliet. Clarissa needed more answers. "Why her?" Clarissa asked, staring at a pond reflecting the moonlight. "What did she have that I didn't?" Robert stuffed his hands in his pockets. "It wasn't about her being better than you. It was about me feeling invincible, like I could have everything. I was seduced by the thrill, the secrecy, and I told myself lies, that it was harmless or temporary. But it wasn't harmless at all." Clarissa's breath caught. The honesty stung. "I guess I needed to hear that," she murmured. "It was about your ego, not my deficiencies." He nodded. "Exactly. It was never you, Clarissa. You were always perfect in my eyes. I was just too selfish to see what I had." They continued walking in silence, the cool breeze whispering among the trees. Robert offered to take her back to the motel, but Clarissa hesitated. Finally, she spoke. "If you want, you can stay on my couch for tonight. My father fixed a leaky sink this morning, so the place is presentable." He smiled softly, nodding. "I'd like that." As they made their way back, Clarissa felt a strange mix of fear and hope swirling in her chest. She wanted to believe in redemption, for the sake of their unborn child and the love they once shared. Yet she knew that fully healing would be an uphill battle, requiring more than apologies. It would require unwavering commitment, honesty, and time. In the 7th month of her pregnancy, Clarissa began experiencing mild complications. She felt fatigued more often, her blood pressure occasionally spiking. Dr. Naomi Benson recommended additional rest and even hinted that Clarissa might need early maternity care if the issues persisted. Robert, who had by now become a constant presence, tried to alleviate her burden. He cooked meals, tidied her apartment, and accompanied her to every doctor's visit. They fell into a gentle rhythm of cohabitation, though Clarissa insisted he maintain the couch at night. to respect her emotional boundaries. Despite the awkward arrangement, she appreciated his support more than she cared to admit. One morning, Clarissa woke up feeling dizzy and short of breath. Panic swelled inside her. Robert, asleep on the couch, bolted upright when she cried out. He rushed to her side, helping her sit and guiding her through deep, calming breaths. Fear clouded his expression as he called an ambulance, his voice quavering when he explained the situation. At the hospital, nurses rushed Clarissa into a monitoring room. Robert paced the hallway, raking his hands through his hair, cursing himself for not spotting the warning signs earlier. Eventually, Dr. Benson emerged with a measured smile. "She's stable," she said, "but her blood pressure is concerning. We'll need to keep her overnight for observation." Relief flooded Robert. "Can I see her?" Dr. Benson nodded, and Robert hurried to Clarissa's side. She lay on the bed, an IV drip in her arm. Despite looking pale, she managed a weak smile when he approached. He gently clasped her hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears threatening. "I should have taken better care of you." "It's not your fault," she managed to say, wincing slightly. "Pregnancy can be unpredictable." He swallowed, leaning in close. "If anything happened to you or the baby—" His voice trailed off, thick with emotion. Clarissa's eyes grew misty. "We're okay for now." Later, her parents arrived, and Harriet embraced Clarissa, tears of concern shining in her eyes. Michael patted Robert's shoulder, acknowledging his presence. The older man seemed torn, grateful for Robert's help, but still harboring resentment over his betrayal. After a day of monitoring, Clarissa's conditions stabilized enough for her to be discharged with strict instructions to rest and manage stress levels. Robert took on the role of caregiver, working quietly from her living room on a laptop he'd brought, stepping away from calls to fetch her water or healthy snacks. He even arranged a new supply of prenatal vitamins and a special herbal tea Dr. Benson recommended. During those days of forced downtime, the tension between them started to ease. They talked more openly about their past, about how quickly their whirlwind romance had turned into a high-stakes marriage overshadowed by Robert's empire. Clarissa confessed she had felt lonely, isolated by the demands of his business and the endless social obligations. Robert admitted he'd been addicted to achievement, oblivious to how much it cost them emotionally. As they shared these vulnerable moments, an old spark rekindled. There were still moments when Clarissa felt the sting of betrayal, but at least they were talking, communicating in a way they hadn't for years. One afternoon, Clarissa mustered the courage to ask a question that had haunted her. "What if I hadn't left? Would you have continued seeing Juliet?" Robert's face paled. He stared at his hands. "I hope I would have come to my senses. But sometimes I think if you hadn't left, I might never have realized how far I'd strayed from the man I wanted to be." Tears glistened in Clarissa's eyes. "I left not just because of her, but because I didn't recognize you anymore. The Robert I fell in love with used to prioritize family over everything. Then you changed." He nodded soberly. "I can't blame you. Maybe I needed that slap of reality to remember my values. I can't fix the past, but I'm here, doing everything I can to rebuild your trust." In that moment, Clarissa realized that trust, once broken, could never be the same. It might be rebuilt into something new, perhaps stronger or perhaps more fragile, but definitely changed. Only time would tell if their bond could endure this test. For the sake of the baby, Clarissa decided to give Robert a chance to prove his commitment. She resolved to let him stay, to see if he could remain unwavering despite the hardships and the ghosts of his past mistakes. But lingering in the back of her mind was the fear that Juliet wouldn't accept defeat easily, and that Robert's complicated world might still pose a threat to their fragile reconciliation. Just as Clarissa and Robert began forging tentative steps toward a new normal, Juliet Summers reappeared like a ghost determined to haunt them. It started with phone calls, at first anonymous, then revealing her unmistakable, sultry voice on the other end of the line. Clarissa answered one day, and her blood froze at Juliet's mocking greeting. "Such a shame, Clarissa, that you're cooped up in that little apartment, while I could offer Robert the world," Juliet purred. "He'll come running back eventually. Trust me." Clarissa ended the call in fury, her hands shaking. She told Robert, who immediately blocked Juliet's number on both his phone and Clarissa's. But the harassment escalated. Juliet filed a frivolous lawsuit against West Innovations, accusing Robert of breaching an investment contract. The potential legal fallout was massive, threatening to drain Robert's resources and drag him back into a high-stress environment that endangered Clarissa's delicate condition. Robert spent long hours on the phone with lawyers, swearing he would handle it. He refused to leave Clarissa's side, however, insisting he could manage the crisis remotely. Despite the emotional toll, Clarissa felt a strange sense of security in Robert's unwavering presence. He was no longer the man who would hop on a plane at the first sign of a business opportunity. He was here, day after day, choosing her over everything else. But Juliet's reach extended beyond legal maneuvers. She leveraged her status in high society to stir up rumors in the tabloids, painting Clarissa as a gold-digging wife who faked a pregnancy scare to keep Robert from a lucrative partnership. Photographers circled Clarissa's modest apartment, hoping to snap a shot of the reclusive billionaire and his tempestuous wife. The local mothers group even started whispering about the drama, though most rallied around Clarissa, dismissing the tabloids for what they were: sensational gossip. One evening, a series of thunderous knocks rattled Clarissa's front door. Robert opened it to find Juliet herself, her auburn hair slicked into a perfect chignon, wearing a trench coat that looked straight off a runway. "How dare you refuse my calls?" she spat, pushing past Robert into the living room. Her eyes fell upon Clarissa, who was seated on the couch, hand on her pregnant belly. What a charming domestic scene! Clarissa stood, heartbeat pounding in her ears. "Get out," she demanded, voice quivering. Juliet offered a scornful smile. "I came to speak to Robert about the lawsuit. It can all go away with a simple signature, a renewal of our business contract. No need to drag lawyers into it." Her gaze shifted to Clarissa. "But of course, that means you'd have to share him. Again." Robert stepped between them, eyes blazing. "Enough, Juliet. I won't sign anything. Our partnership is over. I'll fight you in court if I have to." Juliet's laugh was as cold as broken glass. "Suit yourself. You'll regret it. Both of you." She spun on her heels and marched out, slamming the door behind her. Clarissa sank onto the couch, trembling with adrenaline. Robert knelt beside her, holding her hands in his. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice thick with shame and frustration. "I dragged you into this." Clarissa swallowed hard, tears pooling in her eyes. "I just want to live peacefully, raise our child without this drama. Why won't she leave us alone?" Robert tightened his grip on her hands. "Because she lost. She can't stand losing me, or the money and influence she stood to gain. But I won't be swayed this time. I promise." Over the next few weeks, legal teams battled incessantly behind the scenes, culminating in a settlement that cost Robert a significant sum. But at least severed all contractual ties with Juliet. She remained a looming threat, her venomous comments occasionally surfacing in gossip columns. But day by day, Clarissa found solace in the knowledge that Robert was finally choosing her without hesitation. The baby's due date approached, and Clarissa's anxiety soared. Would Juliet's lingering bitterness cast a dark shadow over the joyous event of their child's birth? Could Clarissa truly forgive Robert enough to welcome him fully back into her life and into fatherhood? With each passing day, Clarissa's belly grew heavier, and so did her determination. She vowed that when the child arrived, it would be into a home united by loyalty, forgiveness, and resolve. Whatever storms Juliet conjured, Clarissa refused to let them destroy the possibility of a renewed family. Clarissa's contractions started late one winter evening, during a quiet moment on the couch with Robert. They'd been watching a documentary, far removed from the glamorous galas or high society events that once defined their life. When the first contraction struck, Clarissa gasped, clutching Robert's arm in a grip of iron. He jumped up, reaching for the hospital bag they had prepared days ago. She breathed through the pain, feeling an odd mixture of excitement, fear, and relief. "It's time," she whispered, tears in her eyes. The drive to the hospital in a modest sedan. Robert had sold many of his luxury cars to downsize and show Clarissa he was serious about changing, felt surreal. Snowfall dusted the roads, each flake glimmering under the streetlights. Once they reached the hospital, nurses guided Clarissa into a birthing suite, hooking her up to monitors. Robert stayed by her side, encouraging her through each contraction, wiping the sweat from her brow and offering ice chips. Samantha arrived shortly after, providing moral support, and Clarissa's parents waited anxiously in the corridor. Hours passed in a haze of intense labor. Clarissa gripped Robert's hand like a lifeline, occasionally crying out in pain. He whispered reassurances, his voice trembling with empathy. Dr. Benson maintained a calm, professional demeanor, guiding Clarissa through every push. Finally, a piercing cry filled the room. Clarissa gasped, relief and exhaustion flooding her body, tears spilling down her cheeks. Dr. Benson announced, "It's a girl." Robert's face lit with awe as he saw their daughter for the first time. When the doctor placed the tiny, wrinkled baby onto Clarissa's chest, Clarissa felt a tidal wave of love. A fierce protectiveness surged within her. Robert hovered close, his voice choked with emotion as he thanked Clarissa repeatedly, tears glimmering in his eyes. They named their daughter Amelia Rose West. Tiny Amelia wailed, clinging to her mother's warmth, oblivious to the storm that had engulfed her parents' lives. In that moment, Clarissa and Robert looked at each other, silently acknowledging a shared miracle. The baby they had created, despite betrayal, heartbreak, and despair, was finally here, offering them a brand new start if they could hold on to it. Days later, back at Clarissa's apartment, balloons and well-wishes from friends and family lined the walls. Harriet and Michael fussed over Amelia, while Robert carefully laid her down in a crib they had set up in Clarissa's bedroom. Clarissa, still physically tender from childbirth, sat on the couch, sipping warm tea. Robert approached her, gently taking a seat. He hesitated, then quietly said, "I was thinking maybe we can find a bigger place together. A house with a yard, maybe near your parents, so Amelia can grow up with grandparents nearby." Clarissa stared at him, pondering. She thought about the life they once dreamed of, the penthouse living that had nearly broken them. A simple house, with space for a child to play and family to visit, felt more authentic to who they were becoming. "I'd like that," she said softly, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Robert reached for her hand. "And about us, I hope we can keep working on rebuilding what I destroyed. I know you might never fully forgive me, but I—" Clarissa placed a finger on his lips, silencing him. "We've come a long way already. Trust isn't about forgetting the past. It's about forging a new path forward. You've shown me you're willing to change. That matters." He leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Clarissa closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of contentment. They had survived betrayal, heartache, and the destructive force of Juliet's revenge. What lay ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be scars, lingering doubts. But for the first time, Clarissa felt hope blooming, steady as Amelia's heartbeat. Across the room, Amelia fussed, and Robert hurried to rock her gently in his arms. Clarissa watched him, the hardened billionaire now utterly smitten by a tiny bundle in pink pajamas. A smile tugged at her lips, warmth flooding her chest. Despite everything, life had granted them a second chance. With time, patience, and unwavering commitment, they just might craft the family they had once dared to dream of. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster of love, betrayal, heartbreak, and redemption. Clarissa and Robert's journey reminds us all that even when darkness engulfs a relationship, there can be hope if both hearts commit to transformation. Their renewed promise to each other and to the precious life they've brought into the world stands as a testimony that genuine remorse, honesty, and perseverance can spark a second chance. If you found yourself rooting for Clarissa, empathizing with her pain, or celebrating her ultimate triumph, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories. Your support helps us continue to create dramatic tales filled with raw emotion, powerful lessons, and heartwarming resolutions. Until next time, may love guide you through life's twists and turns, and may second chances lead to the happiness we all deserve.